They sent a hunter for your name, and the hunter came back with praise in his mouth. Chosen one, yes, you. You live so clean that even an investigation turns into a fan club meeting, and now you know your enemies are in trouble. They were so sure they'd find something. They wanted it to be true. Every rumor, every lie, every twisted story they whispered behind your back. They needed dirt, like vultures circling a body that never dropped. But the part that burns the most, there was no fall. There was no mess, no scandal. Just a steady, quiet force walking through life with truth in their step and peace in their chest. They sent someone to dig through your story, but instead of finding skeletons, they uncovered strength. They didn't find dirt, they found gold. How mad they were. They thought they had a case. They were fully prepared for your fall, ready with their popcorn, their fake sympathy, and a folder full of out-of-context screenshots. But when the investigator finally did what investigators are supposed to do, go to the people who actually know you, they didn't find any dirt, no secrets, no scandals, just real ones standing up for you. Instead of skeletons in the closet, they found neatly folded clothes and a trail of receipts, proving you've been solid from the start. They thought they were about to expose you. What actually got exposed was their own bitterness, their obsession with your peace, their inability to understand how someone could be so grounded without needing validation. They tried to manufacture a downfall, but the universe flipped the script. And it all started with a quiet investigation, one that backfired so beautifully it almost looked planned. Before we go any further, if this message is resonating with your soul, take a moment to press like and subscribe. Help this message travel to the next silent warrior who's fighting battles behind smiles. It's not just support, it's a shared responsibility to keep the truth louder than the lies. Now, chosen one. Imagine their faces when they heard this from the investigator. Oh yeah, they're actually one of the most consistent and respectful people I've ever worked with. They never thought the truth would be your alibi. They assumed it was an act, that the goodness you carry must be some kind of performance. But when the so-called investigator reached out to your co-workers, your old friends, the people who'd seen you in real life, what they found wasn't scandal, but respect. Focused, loyal, minds their business, always helpful. These weren't paid reviews. These were real echoes of your character. And suddenly, the entire smear campaign began to crumble. Let's be honest, the investigator probably wasn't some professional. More likely, it was a mutual contact wearing fake concern like perfume, someone asking questions with a hidden camera in their soul. But instead of scandal, all they found was evidence that you live clean, walk steady, and don't play into drama. Every conversation they had only confirmed it further. You're real, you're rare, you're respected. And that truth burned deeper than anything they could have made up. Most gossip doesn't come from facts. It comes from jealousy in disguise. They don't hate what you've done wrong. They hate what you've done right. They hate how you walk into rooms without begging for attention, how your silence commands more respect than their loudest noise. They hate how people admire you without being forced to. They hate how you move with dignity, how your name gets mentioned in good light, even when you're not around to hear it. That's what eats them alive. They tried to poison your name in group chats, hoping it would stick, but your character was already the antidote. Your reputation is built on something too solid for their petty lies to crack. You've been consistent, patient, quiet when it wasn't your turn to speak, and powerful when it was. They couldn't smear you because your real-life presence overpowered their fake narratives. the people they questioned became unintentional witnesses for the defense. How much power must you carry, that even those sent to hurt you return with a quiet respect they can't even admit out loud? This wasn't gossip. It was spiritual surveillance. It was a mission to destroy your image that turned into a confirmation of your integrity. They went behind your back, hoping to find a flaw, but ran straight into receipts of who you really are: steady, kind, unshakable. And now they're angry, not because they were right, but because they were so painfully wrong. They wanted to see you fall. Instead, they watched your name rise. They thought they'd find chaos. Instead, they found calm. And now they have to sit with the embarrassment of knowing they played themselves. You didn't have to defend yourself. You didn't chase the lies. You just lived in your truth, and that truth did the work for you. So let them keep digging. Let them whisper. Let them investigate, because every move they make only confirms what the universe has already decided. Your name is clear. Your soul is intact. Your reputation is sealed in the kind of light that no shade can overpower. Chosen one, they tried to assassinate your character. What they really did was help build your legacy. And now, they're mad. It was all good gossip. So now that the smoke is clearing and the truth is standing tall, are you ready to break this down piece by piece? Because trust me, the real story has way more to reveal. And if you're truly one of the chosen, this won't just entertain you. It'll awaken something deep in your own journey. Drop the number 777 in the comments. Yes, 3 sevens. Why? Because 777 is the vibration of alignment, protection, and truth finally being revealed. It means the universe is clearing the path, and what was meant to break you is now proving you. And if this message has touched something in you, if it's given you strength, clarity, or even just a moment of truth, please consider supporting the team behind it with a small super gift. Whether it's $1 or $1,000, the number doesn't matter. The energy does. We pour our hearts into these messages to bring light to souls like yours, and every bit of love you give helps keep that light burning. Now take a deep breath and stay with me. It's about to get even more real. Number 1, they went digging for dirt, but all they hit was concrete. They brought a shovel to ruin your name, but it snapped against the life you built in silence. They were ready to feast on your failure, hungry for chaos, praying for a scandal. You know the type. They hide in group chats, whispering behind fake smiles, pretending to check in while secretly hoping for your collapse. Their fingers were crossed that you'd slip, stumble, or reveal some past mistake they could run wild with, because to them, your peace is offensive, your consistency, a threat. Let's be clear, this wasn't innocent curiosity. This was war, a silent operation dressed up as concern, a setup disguised as questions. They weren't looking for answers, they were looking for ammo, a text, a voice note, an old flame, a single loose thread they could yank and unravel everything you've built. They wanted to assassinate your character without ever dirtying their own hands. Let someone else do the digging. Let someone else find the dirt. Let someone else spread the story. All they needed was one small crack. Just one. But instead, they choked on clean air, because when that so-called investigator did what they do, talk to the people who actually know you, work with you, lived around you, they didn't find the mess they were hoping for. They didn't find lies. They didn't find chaos. They didn't find a mask slipping off. They found you, The same version of you that walks in silence and leaves a trail of respect behind. The version that stayed true even when no one was watching. The one that kept receipts, not revenge. That moved with integrity while they fumbled with projection. They wanted skeletons. What they got was structure. What they got was a life built on quiet strength, honesty, and real ones who had your name in their mouths, but with honor. See, that's what they didn't expect. They thought you were like them, pretending, shaky, two-faced, but the truth hit them like a slap. You weren't acting, you weren't fronting, you were really about what you said you were about. And that's when the bitterness kicked in. They weren't just disappointed, they were furious, because now their entire plan had backfired. The gossip train they tried to drive ran straight into a wall called your truth. The more they investigated, the stronger your case became. The more they asked around, the clearer it was. You weren't perfect, but you were solid, consistent, genuine, unshakable. You see, people like them expect everyone to be performing. They believe everyone's hiding something because they're hiding everything. They assume your light must be fake because theirs is always flickering. So when they sent someone to sniff out the scandal, they thought it'd be easy. They thought anyone would say, "Oh yeah, I've seen them act fake." Or, "They used to be messy back in the day." But instead, they heard things like, "She's always been respectful. He minds his business and handles his work. They don't do drama." Can you imagine their faces? Sitting there, waiting for the juice, and all they got was tea too clean to sip. They didn't just fail to ruin you, they accidentally promoted you. They gave free airtime to your character, and now they're sick. Not just because the plot flopped, but because deep down they know they could never survive that same kind of searchlight. Because let's ask the real question. If they were under investigation, what would their friends say? What would their co-workers reveal? What kind of digital trail would they leave behind? Probably one full of excuses, lies, manipulation, and masked intentions. That's why they hate you, not because you've done anything to them, but because you remind them of everything they're not. You live clean in a world where deception is normal. You stay quiet while they scream for attention. You walk with respect while they trade theirs for clout. And now you've survived their attack, not with defense, not with drama, but by simply continuing to be who you've always been. Let that sink in. They came for your name and ended up shining a spotlight on your integrity. They launched a private investigation and ended up proving you were never the one in question. So the next time you feel the heat, the whispers, the side eyes from people who pretend not to be watching, remember, their problem isn't what you've done. It's what they can't do. They can't move like you. They can't live like you. They can't be at peace without first tearing someone else down. But you don't need the last word. You are the final sentence. You don't need to clap back. Your life is already testifying louder than any lie they could tell. This is why you've been feeling eyes on you. This is why the tension's been thick, even when no one says a word. You've been under silent surveillance, chosen one, but the results are in. The witnesses have spoken. And the verdict? You're exactly who you say you are. Let them be mad, let them whisper, let them drown in their own confusion. Because while they were praying for dirt, you were planting seeds. While they were hoping you'd fall, you were quietly building something they could never destroy. So the next time you sense someone trying to study your downfall, just smile, because the last time they tried that, they ended up writing you a 5-star review. They went digging for dirt, but all they hit was concrete. Number 2, they thought the streets would echo their lies, but the streets echoed your legacy. You don't need to defend your name when the streets already carved it in stone. They thought they could stain your name in the shadows, and the world would just go along with it. Whisper a lie here, plant a rumor there, and sit back while the infection spreads. They believed that if they polluted enough private corners with poison, the streets would catch the smell and turn on you. They were counting on the public echoing their private envy. They assumed silence on your part was weakness. But silence has never meant surrender. It's just the sound truth makes before it walks in the room. And when the time came, when a real one, a neutral voice, an actual investigator started checking the facts, asking around, doing what they do, everything shifted. The silence spoke. The streets didn't whisper lies. They shouted facts, loud, clear, unshakable. They expected the streets to back them up, but the streets said, "Nah, you got the wrong one." They wanted confirmation for the chaos they created, but what they got was contradiction, rejection, correction. The same people they hoped would trash your name were the ones praising you, not because you begged them to, not because you bribed or manipulated, but because your presence, your real, authentic presence, had already done the groundwork. You don't just move through the world, you leave proof behind. Quiet, strong, undeniable proof. They thought they were telling the story of who you are, but they didn't write your story, you did. Every interaction, every decision, every moment you chose to move with class when you could have clapped back, every time you stayed focused instead of messy, that wrote the chapters they forgot to read. And now the streets are testifying. They can't erase what people actually lived. The woman who worked beside you in silence and saw how you carried yourself under pressure. She spoke up. The friend who watched you support others without needing credit, he spoke up. The folks who saw you lead with calm while others panicked, give respect when no one was watching, show up without an audience, that's who the investigator heard from. And what they said couldn't be twisted. She's real. He's solid. They don't start drama, they walk away from it. They do what they say and say what they mean. That's when the whole plan fell apart, because gossip needs agreement to survive. It feeds on echoes, and they were sure the streets would echo back their lies like gospel, but instead the streets bounced the truth right back in their faces. Let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered why some people are so obsessed with dragging your name through the mud? It's not because of what you did to them. It's because your name carries weight without their help. Your energy speaks before your mouth does. You show up real, and that exposes their fake. They can't control how others see you, so they try to pollute it. But here's the truth they'll never admit out loud. They wish they had your reputation. They wish they had your restraint. They wish they had your peace. But instead, they have group chats and screenshots and circles of people just like them, spiteful, weak, always watching but never growing. They assumed your silence meant vulnerability, that you weren't defending yourself because you had something to hide. But no, you weren't hiding. You were just watching, waiting, letting them exhaust themselves in the performance, while you kept doing what you do best, living clean, staying solid, and letting real life speak when the lies faded. And now, the lies have faded, because the moment someone stepped in with real ears, ready to listen, not just believe, the truth exploded. It didn't trickle out. It didn't whisper. It roared. The streets didn't just reject their lies. They testified on your behalf. And that's what hurts them the most. Because they thought this would be easy. They thought it'd be fun. Start a few rumors, spread a little smoke, and watch you panic while your image crumbled. But your image isn't something you crafted to impress people. It's something you earned through years of walking with intention. And that kind of legacy doesn't shake when someone throws shade. It absorbs the hit and grows stronger. They underestimated the power of quiet respect. They forgot that real ones don't need to speak loudly, because when it matters, the streets speak for them. And let me tell you something else. It wasn't just your co-workers or your friends who had your back. It was the energy you've built, the spirit in which you move, the unseen impact you've had on people who may never even have told you how deeply you inspired them. Those people were watching too, and when the moment came, they said what needed to be said. He showed up when no one else did. She stayed grounded through all the mess. They've always moved different. So now they're left standing in the wreckage of their own plan. The smear campaign flopped. The whispers didn't travel. The streets didn't fold. And now they're faced with the truth. You're not just clean, you're untouchable in the areas they thought were vulnerable. They called in reinforcements to ruin you, but all they did was highlight what kind of respect you truly carry. They called it gossip, but the streets called it truth. And truth doesn't ask permission to speak. It walks in uninvited and clears the room. So let them talk. Let them twist. Let them spin whatever story makes them feel safe. Because out here, in the real world, your name rings different. And when the streets speak, no rumor can drown it out. They tried to weaponize the public, but the public already knew who you were. And now they know too. Even if they'll never admit it, they thought the streets would echo their lies. But instead, the streets shouted your legacy. Number 3, even the quiet witnesses had nothing ugly to say. When even your silence stands as a witness, that's not just reputation, that's legacy. They had a plan, a dirty, fragile little plan, built on the hope that someone, anyone, would crack under pressure and finally tell the ugly truth about you. They thought that by prying into the quiet corners of your life, they'd find the flaw, the one story, the one grudge, the one ex-friend, co-worker or classmate who would say, "Yeah, I never liked them anyway." But the plan fell flat. Again. Because even the quiet ones, the ones who don't speak up, the ones who watched you from a distance, the ones who don't owe you loyalty, had nothing ugly to say. And that's what shook them the most. Because that kind of silence doesn't come from manipulation. It doesn't come from fear. It comes from truth. They talked to your ex-friend, hoping for fire, and all they got was, "We drifted." But they were always respectful. They found the co-worker you barely spoke to, and all they could say was, they stayed in their lane, always handled their work. The distant classmate never gave drama, moved different. What do you do when even the people who don't like someone can't find a bad word to say? You panic. And they did, because they assumed your silence was hiding something dark. Instead, it was hiding something rare, purity. Not perfection, but real, unshakable character. Let's be real, when most people are accused, someone always steps forward to co-sign the chaos. It's human nature, old jealousy, a forgotten slight, a misread moment. But not you. You've moved through life like a shadow in the noise. Not looking for approval, not fighting for clout. Just consistent, clean, and calm. And that consistency is what made even your non-supporters stay honest. Because when you're real, even your enemies end up telling the truth. You know who else lived this story? Take Nelson Mandela, locked away for 27 years, demonized by a system built to break him. And when he walked out, the world realized something. Even in silence, he never became bitter. Even prison guards respected him. That's legacy. Not because he was loud, but because he was real. Look at Malcolm X, vilified in his early years, hated, misquoted, targeted, and yet even those who disagreed with him couldn't deny his discipline, his transformation, his focus. He moved with clarity, not chaos. And in the end, his enemies had to admit they never saw him fold. This is your league now. That's who you resemble. The kind of person who doesn't need defenders because their life does the defending. The kind of soul that doesn't chase revenge because truth is always on a time delay. But it never misses its mark. They tried to squeeze blood from a stone, but there was none. They tried to stretch silence into scandal, but it wouldn't bend. You're not just liked, you're respected. You're not just unproblematic. You're unshakable, and when even the quiet witnesses stay quiet, that's not luck. That's legacy. That's consistency. That's you. Number 4, they wanted a report, but got a reflection instead. They held up a spotlight to expose you and ended up blinding themselves with the truth. They came into this thinking they were the ones with the power, holding the flashlight, writing the questions, gathering the evidence. In their mind, you were on trial, and the outcome was already decided. They weren't searching for truth, they were staging a takedown. They believed the investigation would shine an unforgiving light on you, crack open your mask, and finally prove the lies they've whispered behind closed doors. But something went wrong, because the moment that light was turned on, it didn't just land on you, it landed on them too. And that's when the rage began. Not because the report was wrong, but because it was right. Too right. Every compliment about your character sounded like an insult to their own. Every story about your grace under pressure echoed like an accusation in their own mind. Each witness who spoke up for your strength became another reminder of the weakness they keep trying to hide. They didn't uncover a fake, they uncovered a mirror. See, people like them are terrified of someone like you, not because you're perfect, but because you reflect everything they aren't ready to confront in themselves. You're patient where they're impulsive. You're calm where they're chaotic. You've mastered restraint while they still rely on drama for attention. You don't need to be loud to be heard, and that alone shakes them to their core. You didn't just survive the spotlight, you stood in it without flinching, and that exposed them more than any investigation ever could. A mirror doesn't judge, it simply reveals, and that's the real problem. They weren't ready to be revealed. The investigation wasn't about facts, it was about fantasy. They needed you to fall. They needed the world to see something broken, something ugly, something they could use to justify their hate. But when all they found was light, consistency, respect from real ones, it cornered them. And when insecure people are cornered by the truth, they don't reflect. They rage. Let's take it deeper. Look at history. Think of Socrates. They put him on trial not because he was evil, but because his wisdom made the powerful feel exposed. He forced people to think, and in doing so, held up a mirror they weren't ready to look into. So they silenced him. Temporarily. But the truth, the mirror, still stands today. The same thing happened to Muhammad Ali. They hated his confidence, his clarity, the way he stood in his truth when everyone else tried to twist it. But his light only exposed the systems trying to dim him. And decades later, that mirror still reflects stronger than ever. You are no different. Your existence alone is a reminder that realness still exists, that someone can move with honor in a world addicted to fakery. That peace isn't just possible, it's powerful, And that kind of presence, it makes people who rely on lies feel exposed, without you ever saying a word. You didn't try to hurt them. You didn't even point fingers. You just lived in your truth. And truth, like a mirror, doesn't flatter. It shows. That's why they're mad. That's why they talk. That's why they spin. Because the real pain wasn't in what the report revealed about you. It was in what it exposed about them. The mirror didn't lie, and it never will. Number 5. They didn't just lose control. They lost the whole damn narrative. You can only control the story until the truth starts talking. And when it does, your lies don't just fall apart, they collapse with witnesses. They thought they had it all figured out, the manipulation, the timing, the audience. They didn't need physical power, they wanted social power, emotional control, influence without proof. They whispered carefully selected lies in strategic places. They dropped half-truths like poison in the ears of people who mattered. They twisted your silence into guilt, your peace into arrogance, your calm into evidence of something off. But the thing about false narratives is this: once they hit real soil, they rot. And that's exactly what happened. They thought they were planting seeds, but they were just scattering dead leaves. Because when someone finally decided to stop listening and start investigating, when a neutral voice went straight to the source instead of feeding off the drama, the truth blew the entire script to pieces. One by one, real people stepped forward. Not your inner circle, not your ride-or-die crew, but regular folks, co-workers, old classmates, distant connections, people with no agenda, no reason to lie, and no emotional stake in defending you. And what did they say? They're not who you said they were. They stay in their lane. They don't start drama, they avoid it. They've always been respectful. The pattern was too clear, too consistent, too real. It wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a reversal. Suddenly, the power shifted. The lie couldn't hold its weight anymore. It had no traction, no legs, no spine, because a lie can only live as long as no one checks it. But the second truth steps in the room, it's over. And the moment the story slipped out of their hands, they didn't just lose the battle. They lost control of the entire narrative. And that's a different kind of pain. See, people like this don't just want to hurt you, they want to own the version of you that the world sees. It's not enough to hate you privately. They want to curate your downfall, sculpt your story, become the unseen narrator behind your name. But the moment truth becomes louder than gossip, they lose that pen. And when they lose the pen, they lose the power. History's seen this before. Look at Harriet Tubman. They branded her a criminal, a threat, a liar. But her actions kept exposing the truth. Over and over, her legacy rewrote the version her enemies tried to control. Or Joan of Arc. They called her a heretic, tried to break her spirit, distort her purpose. But centuries later, she's not remembered as what they said. She's remembered as what she proved. The same power lives in you. You didn't chase rumors. You didn't scream into the wind. You let life speak, and life spoke loudly. That's why they're spiraling. Not because you exposed them, but because they failed to rewrite you. They lost control. They lost credibility. But most importantly, they lost ownership of the story. And now the only version of you that stands is the real one. Number 6. You've been so real, even strangers could testify. When strangers defend your name without being asked, that's not charisma, that's legacy in motion. You didn't need to curate a perfect image. You didn't post quotes about loyalty while moving like a snake behind closed doors. You didn't rehearse kindness for the camera and then poison rooms in private. You weren't out here trying to look good. You just were. Quiet, solid, consistent. No performance, no press tour, just a life lived in alignment, day by day, decision by decision, interaction by interaction. And that kind of authenticity, it builds something you can't fake. A spiritual fingerprint, a reputation that speaks in your absence, a vibe that enters rooms before you do and lingers long after you're gone. They didn't expect that. They were banking on chaos. They thought people would say, well, I don't really know them, but something always felt off. They expected those little passive-aggressive remarks, the vague shade, the subtle digs that give lies just enough oxygen to spread. Instead, what they got was unity, consistency, echoes of truth from corners you didn't even know you'd reached. People who barely talked to you said it loud and clear. They were always respectful, never brought drama, solid, every time. That's what stunned your enemies. They thought your strength came from your circle. They didn't realize it came from your spirit, from how you treat people when there's no benefit in doing so, from how you handle the mundane moments that nobody documents, nobody posts, nobody claps for. Because when your smallest moments are rooted in integrity, your whole life becomes evidence. Think of someone like Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, a soft-spoken man, no flash, no controversy, just presence. But even decades later, strangers who met him once, for a moment, still speak of him like he changed their lives. That's not PR. That's not performance. That's soul. You've got that same rare energy. People don't need to know your life story to feel your essence. You walk into a space and it gets calmer. You speak and people pay attention, not because you're loud, but because you're real. And now the truth is undeniable. The rumors couldn't survive the consistency of your character, not just because of your friends, not because of your closest allies, but because even strangers, yes, strangers, stood up and said, "Nah, you got the wrong one." That kind of validation can't be manufactured. That kind of energy can't be forced. You've been so authentically you, even people who barely know you knew better than to believe a lie. And that's a reputation rooted in something deeper than image. That's a signature your spirit wrote, and no smear campaign in the world can forge it. Number 7. They laughed at your solitude until it became your shield. They mistook your silence for weakness, but silence is what saved you from the storm they built with their own mouths. They used to smirk at the way you moved, quiet, detached, minding your own business like it was a fortress. They thought your solitude was strange, even suspicious. You didn't join their little circles. You weren't in their gossip rotations, you didn't show up to the drama, and you didn't feed it either. So they labeled you cold, distant, arrogant, the kind of person who thinks they're better than everyone else. But here's what they didn't realize. You weren't avoiding people, you were avoiding the pit. And now, that pit has swallowed them whole. Because while they were building alliances made of gossip and ego, fragile bridges that collapse under pressure, you were building in silence. Alone, yes, but aligned, focused, grounded. And when the storm finally came, it didn't shake you. It couldn't. You weren't in the mess. You weren't in the back channels. You weren't in the group chats where plots got formed and lies got passed around like candy. You were out of range, and that made you untouchable. They mistook your solitude for isolation, but solitude is not loneliness, it's self-mastery. While they craved attention, you craved peace. While they chased validation, you chased purpose. And now that everything's falling apart around them, you're still standing, unmoved. Because solitude teaches you discipline. It teaches you how to be your own peace when the world tries to sell you chaos. And they couldn't understand that because they never sat with themselves long enough to hear their own truth. They were too busy trying to stay in the loop. But the loop was a trap, and you walked around it without ever stepping in. Look at history. Think of Marcus Aurelius, an emperor surrounded by schemers, noise, and temptation, but he stayed grounded by his own mind. He wrote quietly, observed deeply, and when the empire shook, his name stood like a stone in a river. Solitude didn't make him weak. It made him unbreakable. Or Rosa Parks, one act of quiet defiance, no shouting, no campaign, no army, just stillness. But that stillness became a weapon. Her calm rewrote history while others made noise and disappeared. You've carried that same power. They didn't see it then, but now they do. Your absence from their mess has now become your immunity. They can't tie you to the chaos because you never danced in their circus. You never drank their poison. You kept your energy clean, even when you were misunderstood for it. What they mocked as antisocial now looks like divine precision. What they called cold now looks like emotional intelligence. What they once laughed at now makes them uncomfortable because you survived what they walked straight into. You were never running from people. You were just protected from their path. And now, the silence they once criticized has become the very shield that saved you. Number 8. The good gossip became your bulletproof vest in a spiritual ambush. They tried to shoot your name down, but every whisper of respect turned into armor you didn't even know you were wearing. You didn't post about your integrity. You lived it, quietly, patiently, when no one was clapping, when no one was looking, when it would have been easier to bend, to bite back, to sink to their level. You didn't. You took the high road when no one was watching, and now that road is rising to protect you. Because while you were just trying to live right, the universe was taking notes. While you were saying no to the mess, the betrayal, the temptation, they were keeping receipts. Not the messy kind, the divine kind, the cosmic kind. And when the shots started flying, when they tried to assassinate your character, you didn't need to explain yourself. You didn't even need to show up. Your name showed up before you did. That's how powerful your quiet consistency has been. People started speaking your name with respect, not out of loyalty, but out of memory. They remembered how you carried yourself in hard times, how you didn't gossip when you had the chance, how you didn't expose people even when they deserved it, how you never chased drama, but always walked in peace. And that reputation, it started doing the work for you. Your good gossip became your spiritual shield. The enemy walked in thinking this would be easy. They thought the lies would stick, that if they said enough, someone would believe it, that if they repeated the smear story long enough, eventually it would become fact. But what they didn't account for was the witnesses. The people you didn't even know were watching. The ones you helped in silence, the ones who remembered how you handled disrespect with dignity. They tried to hold a trial in the shadows, but they walked into a courtroom where your character had already testified. And that's the difference between fake influence and real reputation. Influence can be bought, but reputation, that's earned in the quiet, in the unseen moments, in the way you treated people who couldn't do anything for you, in the times you could have gone low but chose to rise. Think of Princess Diana. They tried to bury her with scandal, but her life had already testified. The nurses, the children, the poor, the ordinary people she touched behind the scenes, they remembered, they spoke. Her truth rose above their smear. Or Tupac. The media twisted his image, but the streets, the culture, they knew the real. His name still echoes louder than any headline they ever printed. That's what happens when your soul is louder than your mistakes. That's you. You've been walking through life, leaving a legacy you didn't even realize was building. And now that spiritual war has arrived and the attacks have begun. Your name is showing up like armor. The good gossip they tried to ignore, it's now the wall they can't get through. So let them plot, let them spin, let them try, because your reputation has already walked into the room ahead of you and made you bulletproof. Number 9. They wanted the investigator to confirm the lie. He confirmed the light. They sent someone to expose you, but the only thing exposed was how deeply you've already outgrown their version of you. Let's be clear, this wasn't about truth. It was never about truth. They didn't want facts. They wanted fuel. They weren't looking for reality. They were chasing reassurance, a reason to keep hating you without guilt. They told themselves a lie about you long ago. She's fake. He's manipulative. They're not who they pretend to be. And instead of healing from their own insecurity, they went out searching for confirmation. Not confirmation of truth, confirmation of their bitterness. So they called in help, a whisper campaign, an investigator, somebody who could back up the narrative they crafted in the dark. But when that person started looking, really looking, what they found wasn't a mask. It was a mirror. The further they looked, the clearer it got. You weren't hiding, you weren't posing, you weren't performing, you were walking in grace, moving in peace, holding your ground with a quiet kind of fire. And that light, it hit harder than any rumor ever could. The investigator didn't confirm the lie, they confirmed the light. They confirmed the calling. It wasn't exposure, it was revelation. Every question led to another layer of truth. How you show up when no one's looking, how you stay calm in chaos, how your loyalty doesn't need applause, how your energy doesn't change based on who's in the room. They thought they'd find a double life, but all they found was double confirmation that you're real. People who fear your light will always pray for proof that it's fake, but truth doesn't shake under pressure, it sharpens. What they didn't count on was your consistency. They didn't count on your grace under fire. They didn't expect that when they tried to dim your name, the investigation would actually shine more light on everything you've built in silence. And that's the thing about being chosen. You don't need defense. Your life is the defense. Your past, clean. Your energy, recognizable. Your story, lived, not staged. And the ones who came to break you, they left with clarity they never asked for. Not just about who you are, but about what they aren't. You didn't just survive the scrutiny, you transcended it. Because the real test wasn't what they found. The real test was whether their lie could survive the truth. And it couldn't. What they planned as exposure turned into elevation. What they expected to ruin your name only revealed your purpose. And now, the same people who sent the fire are standing in the light they tried to bury. They wanted the investigator to confirm the lie, but he confirmed the light. And that's a truth they'll never be able to rewrite. And now, the dust has settled, the masks have dropped, and the truth stands undefeated. They thought they had you figured out, thought they'd written your ending before you even reached your peak, but here you are, still standing, still glowing, still unbothered. You didn't just survive their setup, you flipped the entire script. You became the plot twist they never saw coming. While they were busy writing your downfall in the margins of petty gossip, the universe was writing your rise in bold, permanent ink. They wanted you exposed. Instead, you were unveiled. They wanted a scandal. Instead, they triggered a spotlight. And now your character speaks louder than any lie they tried to plant. If this message hit you in the soul, if it echoed what you've been living in silence, don't let it stop here. Like the video to amplify the truth. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss these reminders, and make sure to press the bell icon. Drop the number 777 in the comments if you know your character has been your quiet shield. Share this with someone who's been walking through fire but refusing to let it turn them to ash. This isn't just content, it's confirmation. Welcome home, Chosen One. Stay grounded, stay glowing, stay protected.